everyone, this is Gina. Today I'm going to show you how to make this crystal embellished knitted necklace. I'm calling this Regal lace because it is really quite regal, looks very expensive, it's a very impressive necklace. It is based upon the capriccio bracelet. Now I may be pronouncing that wrong. There are several tutorials on YouTube on how to make that particular bracelet. I made one a long time ago and thought it was really pretty. I've long since given away as a gift. However, I always thought it would be really nice to have a necklace that would complement that particular bracelet. So the other night I sat down and I devised a way to use the same basic knitting stitch with a few modifications so that instead of the stitch gathering up and pulling in as the bracelet does, it flares out into a circle, and I have a little fringe on it to make it more suitable for the neckline instead of course, the wrist. Now, this particular necklace takes a lot of crystal. So today I'm going to do a little experimenting. Instead of using 4mm round crystals, I'm going to use 4mm round fire polish beads. Fire polish beads are a little bit more oval than they are round, but for some reason they call them round. So this is what I'm going to use today. Now, let's move back and we'll talk about the beads we're going to need. Now, of course, you can use any combination of beads. Instead of using crystals, you could use pearls. You could use fire polish beads. You could use faceted glass beads. You could use anything that suits your fancy. You could use bicones instead of round. I'm pretty sure that that would work just fine. You could get creative. You could mix the crystal and the pearls together, or fire polish and crystal together, whatever you'd like to do. That will help with the amount of crystals that you need for this, because you shouldn't start with anything less than 600 crystals, pearls, fire polish beads, whatever you decide to do. Of course, less of each if you decide to mix them, or if you decide to make your fringe a pearl or something other than a crystal. Today, I'm going to experiment and use fire polish beads, as I said. And get my camera situated here, and we will go through exactly what we'll need for this project. I am going to use 4mm. These are aqua opal round fire polish beads, and I have 600 of them exactly. So I'm hoping my calculations are correct. So I'm going to use those. Then you will need 2 colors of 11/0 seed beads. One will be in your main netting. The other will be in your embellishment with your crystals. I'm going to use, for my embellishment, I'm going to use a check seed bead. It's an 11/0. It's several colors of purple, blue, metallic mixture. I was not able to get exactly the name of it. It came in a hank, as you see, and it's just a number. It doesn't have the exact color. I'm also going to use, in my main part of my netting, instead of my embellishment, I'm going to use another color of 11/0 seed beads, and this one is a Toho. It's galvanized silver. And then, in my main netting, I will use an 8/0 seed bead. This is also a check, and it is, again, came in a hank, so I don't have the exact name, but it is kind of a translucent rainbow with several different greens and blues and purples in it. Then, in your embellishment, you will also need a 15/0. You'll need about 5 grams of this. You won't need this many. But this is a galvanized silver Toho also. When you start with your 11/0s, the one in your main netting, you want to start with a rather large amount. Start with at least 20 grams. You won't use all of these, but start with plenty so that you don't run out in the middle. Your 8/0, I would say start with at least 10 grams, maybe a little more. Just make sure you have plenty, that you don't have to worry about running out of them. The same with your embellishment seed bead. Start out with quite a few. And then you're going to need a 3-strand bar clasp. This is a silver-plated bar clasp. You will need 8-pound fire line, and you will need a lot of it, several yards of it. So make sure you have quite a bit of fire line. I am also using a size 10 English beading needle. Now, just as a reference to help, a nice helpful hint, there is a video on YouTube here called Joining Fire Line for Bead Weaving. I suggest you look that up and learn that little trick. That's going to help a lot. Instead of having to tie on to your projects, especially big projects like this, which uses a lot of thread, this is a wonderful way of extending your fire line as you're working so that you don't have to sew in and tie through and jumble things up as you do that. Joining fire line is a very strong way to extend your thread, and I've never had an issue with it, and since I've learned how to do that, it's been a lot easier to do these larger projects. So just look that up. It's basically tying a square knot and taking a flame from a lighter to both ends and pulling tight, joining two little blobs that the fire creates. And just look at the video, it'll make sense, and it'll help you a lot if you don't already know how to do that. Okay, so as we start this project, you will see that this part of the necklace is a little shorter netting area than this main body of the necklace. So we're going to start with that. I originally made 7 sections, but as I said, I want to try to make this a little longer so that, or 7 units, whatever you want to call it. I want to try to make this a little longer so that my necklace measures 18 inches instead of 16. So we are going to start with this shorter area, and we're going to make 10 units, or actually 12 units on each side. So I will show you how to get started. Okay, so we're going to thread 2 arm spans of 8-pound fire line onto our needle. I'm not going to use quite that much, just so that I don't have to pull as much thread through. Leave and probably about a 10 to 12 inch tail at the end to sew on your clasp. We're going to start with a stop bead. I'm just using a 3mm pearl. Just thread it onto your needle, bring it down to the end of your thread, go through it again, and pull tight. And like I said, leave a 6 to 8 inch tail, probably more like an 8 to 12 inch tail would be better. I'm not going to leave that much right now, but that's what you'll need for your clasp. Now we're going to start with an 8/0 seed bead, 2 11/0 seed beads, an 8/0 seed bead, 2 11/0 seed beads, an 8/0, 2 11/0s, an 8/0, 4 11/0s, an 8/0, and 2 11/0s. So this is what you'll have on your needle. You will have 5 8/0s and 12 11/0s. You will have, I always think of the 8/0s as a segment, so you'll have 4 segments. So that'd be 4 8/0s with 2 11/0s in between. And then you'll have 4 11/0s, an 8/0, and 2 11/0s. Pull this down to the end of your thread. Now you are going to come back through the 3rd 8/0 on your fire line. So we're going to count from the stop bead up, 1 2 3, and we're going to go back into that 8/0 seed bead and pull through. Everything's kind of loose at this point, so just kind of hold on to it and gently pull your thread through. And it'll create a little loop. So that is what you should have. Now we have to do the top portion of our netting, so we're going to pick up 2 11/0s, an 8/0. I'm going to stay zoomed in for a moment, and 2 11/0s. This is what you'll have on your thread. And you will come into not the next 8-0, but the 8-0 on the very top next to your stop bead, and pull through. And this is what you will have. Now we're going to do our next segment. We're going to pick up, that's a full segment right there, and our shorter end, the end of our necklace here. We're starting at the very short end of the necklace. So we're going to pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s. Like I said, I want to stay zoomed in. You know what beads I'm using. So that's what you'll have. And we're going to go right through this first 8-0 that's sticking out. Hold everything together and pull. Okay? And again, we're going to pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s. That's what you have on your needle. And now we're going to go into this bottom little 8-0 here, the one that's sticking out. I'm going to turn my work over so it looks the right direction for you. It's upside down for me, but it's the right direction for you. So this is what we have so far. We've got the top half of our second unit of knitting. Now we need to make the bottom loop. So instead of picking up 2 seed beads, this time we pick up 4. And an 8-0, and then 2. So instead of 2, an 8-0, and 2, we're going to go 4, an 8-0, and 2. And then we are going to go into this seed bead that we just added. Next one kind of sticking out. And that's what you should have. Now we're going to go into this seed bead. We're going to pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s, and go into this 8-0 on top. Now we're going to pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, 2 11-0s, and go into the second seed bead here. It's getting kind of loose here. Tighten it up. Now we're going to pick up, we're going to do the bottom half, so we're going to pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, 2 11-0s, and we're going to come into this seed bead right here. And pull through. Now you can see we're starting to form kind of a skirt on the bottom. That's what makes the difference between the bracelet that inspired this necklace and this necklace, is the little skirting at the bottom here. This is what will create a curve, and this is what will help it lay flat as a necklace instead of curving like a bracelet, and instead of being straight across for a bracelet to fit around your wrist. So when you get to the bottom, you're always going to pick up 4 seed beads and an 8-0, and then 2 11-0s. 4 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s. And we will come back up into the very next 8-0. And pull. And now we need to make our top half. So we are going to pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s. Perhaps my 11-0s are arguing with me. and we're going to come up through the top. And again, same thing. It'll always be 2 11-ohs, a nato, and 2 11-ohs into the next 8-0, two 11-ohs, an 8-0, 2 11-ohs into the 8-0 that's sticking out on the bottom, now we need to do our bottom loop, so 4 11-ohs, an 8-0, and 2 11-ohs up through our next 8-0, two 11-ohs, an 8-0, and 2 11-ohs up through our top 8-0. And you can see the pattern forming now. It's a lot easier as you get started. It just kind of is obvious after a while, and it's very repetitive. So once you get 5 or 6 units done, not even quite that many, actually 3 or 4, you can see exactly what you're doing, and it becomes a lot easier. Netting is always confusing to start with, but once you get it started, it's pretty simple then. Back down into the next 8-0, two 11-ohs, an 8-0, and 2 11-ohs, and back down into the 8-0 on the bottom. Pick up. Now that we're at the bottom, we're going to pick up 4 11-ohs, an 8-0, and then 2 11-ohs, and travel back up into the next 8-0. Pick up 2 11-ohs, an 8-0, and 2 11-ohs. We'll skip this one and come up into the top. Now we're going to do this, these short stitches, until you have 12 loops on the bottom here. So just count the holes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6. So when I have 12, I will be back and I'll show you how to extend the stitch into the main part of our necklace. Okay, so I'm back and I have 12 little loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's going to be the back portion of my necklace. I will hook the clasp here and then I will start to extend down. Let me show you what I'm talking about and give you some reference here. On necklace I've already made, this area is shorter than this area. So, I'll show you on the back, the netting is more obvious. So, we have basically our little 4 loops. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to move down to 6, and I'll show you how to do that. Let's bring back our project here. I'm coming out of the top 8-0 here. I'm coming out right here. So I'm going to do just like I've been doing all along. Pick up 2 11-ohs, an 8-0, 2 11-ohs. Come down through the next 8-0, pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s, come back down through the bottom, 8-0. I'm going to pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, 2 11-0s, an 8-0, and then dropped it, and then 4 11-0s. So I'm going to add another 2 11-0 8-0 unit basically. I'll show you what I have on my needle here. So I'm going to pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, 2 11-0s, an 8-0, 4 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s. So basically, instead of just picking up, normally I just pick up my 4 and then my 2 and go up through the 8. I pick up 4 seed beads, and 8 and 2. I'm putting another unit on there. Instead of coming up through this bead, we are going to come up through this bead, the extra one we added. And this is what it'll look like. Your little loop will just be 1 unit lower than it normally is. Okay? And then we're going to pick up 2 11-0s and an 8-0 and 2 11-0s. And we're going to come into our next protruding 8-0, the one that we would normally come up through. Now we are going to pick up, whoops, let's go out just a little bit so you can see what I'm doing and I won't get out of frame so badly. So basically we looped around, came back up, added 2 11-0s, an 8-0, 2 11-0s, came up through the 8-0, then we're going to pick up 2 more 11-0s and an 8-0, 2 more 11-0s, just like normal, come up through the top. All we've done is add 1 more set of 2 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s. That's all we've done. So we're going to pick up, we're at the top again, we're going to pick up our 2 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s. And we're going to come back down into the next 8-0, as we've been doing all along. And we are going to pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s. And then come through, we're going to skip this one, come through the one that's sticking out. Now, we're going to pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, 2 11-0s, and we will now come through this 8-0 down here that sticks out. And then we will do our loop by picking up our 4 11-0s, our 8-0, and then 2 11-0s, and come up through this seed bead. Now I'm starting to get my loops and my little protrusions, so it will be easier for me to figure out exactly where I need to go. So I'm going to pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, 2 11-0s, and come up through the next protruding seed bead. Now, the same as we've been doing all along, pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s. Come up through the top, 8-0, going to go out just a little bit so that I will stay in frame. Go. But I want you to see what I'm doing too. I have a tendency to not stay in frame, and I apologize for that. Okay, so the same as we've been doing all along, 2 11-ohs, an 8-oh, and 2 11-ohs, and down through the next 8-oh. Two 11-ohs, an 8-oh, 2 11-ohs, and down through the next protruding 8-oh. You'll always skip this middle one. And then 2 11-ohs, an 8-oh, 2 11-ohs, down through the next sticking out 8-oh. I'm getting short on thread, so I'll finish this one and then I will explain exactly how many units you need to do before we will go back down to our short units. Okay, so 4 11-ohs, an 8-oh, 2 11-ohs, up through the 8-oh, 2 11-ohs, an 8-oh, 2 11-ohs, up through the next 8-oh. Two 11-ohs, an 8-oh, 2 11-ohs, up through the next 8-oh, or the top 8-oh actually. Okay, so now hopefully you've got your pattern established. You can see exactly what's happening here. And get you real close. So what we're going to do now is we are going to do 61 of these loops. So we're going to do 61 of the extended units, and then we will come back and we will shorten down. I will show you how to shorten back down to 12 of the shorter units. Okay, so I have finished my longer segments of netting. I've counted 61 loops on the bottom by just counting the spaces in between. Let me show you what I'm talking about. There's like little triangular holes in between each one. Just count those little spaces in between and count 61 of them. Now if you want to make a 16-inch necklace, like I said, I'm going for an 18-inch with this one. If you want to make a 16-inch necklace, you would still use 61 longer units, but you would just only do 7 of the shorter units on both sides. And that will help as a reference if you want to make a smaller necklace. Now, I'm going to get to the end where I've finished my longer units. And I'm coming out of the top here of this little 8-oh. So I'm going to do basically the same thing I have done all along with my units, except for now we're going to shorten them so that it matches the other end of your necklace where we started with short units. So we're going to pick up 2 11-ohs and an 8 and 2 11-ohs, just as we would do if we were going to do another longer unit. And we will go into the next 8-oh as we would do all along, or we have been doing all along actually. And then we will pick up 2 more 11-ohs and an 8 and 2 11-ohs and go into the next 8-0 seed bead, the one that's sticking out. And here is where it changes. Instead of adding 2 11s and an 8 and going into this 8-0, we are just going to do our loop here. So we will pick up, instead of our 2 11-0s, we'll pick up 4 and 8 and then 2 more 11-0s, as we would to make our loop in our longer units. And now we will go up through this seed bead. And now we need to make the top of our shorter unit, so we'll pick up 2 11-0s, an 8-0, and 2 11-0s, and go through the top seed 8-0. Now we've made one of our shorter units. So we'll just proceed the same way we have been, making shorter units this time though, by picking up 2 11s, an 8 and 2 11s, go into the next seed bead, or 8-0, excuse me, and then we will pick up 2 11s, an 8-0 and 2 11s, and go into this 8-0, and we'll make our loop. So we'll pick up 4 11-0s, an 8-0 and 2 11-0s, and go into this seed bead. So you can see now I've reduced my stitch and I'm back down to the short units that we did in the very beginning of the necklace. And I will just proceed by picking up my 2 11-0s, my 8-0 and my 2 11-0s, going back up through the top stitch, and I will continue making these short stitches until I have 12 loops. And count the space in between. When you have 12 of them, we will be back. Okay, so I'm back. I have finished my end segment, my short segments. I have counted 12 openings on the bottom where the loops are, and I'm ready to add my clasp on this end of the necklace. So how we're going to do that, let me get you real close here, is we are coming out of this 8-0 on top here. We're going to use a bar clasp. So first we need to add an 8-0 directly on top of the 8-0 we're coming out of. So I'm going to pick up an 8-0 and I'm going to slide it down to the end of my work, and then I'm going to come back through just the 8-0 in the necklace and pull the one that I just added on top and let it lay in a vertical here. And then I'm just going to ignore that little seed bead for a little while. Now we're coming out of the 8-0 in the necklace portion on the top here. We're going to pick up an 11-0 and an 8-0, and then we're going to, I'm going to back up just a little so you can see the clasp. Still want to be rather close. And then we're going to sew through the top of the clasp. Now this bar clasp separates like this into two pieces. We want to leave it together at this point when we start to attach it to our necklace. Otherwise it can be confusing and we can attach it the wrong direction. When we get done with our necklace, we won't be able to clasp it because it'll be on wrong. So now I'm going to go through this top loop here and pick up a $11-0 and 8-0 and then go through my clasp. Then I'm going to go back through the 8-0 and the 11-0. pull. Now, when I originally started to attach my clasp, I came out of the bottom of this 11-0 on the top. I went through the 11-0 and the 8-0 and through the clasp. Now I want to go through the top, the opposite side of the 8-0 in the necklace. So in essence, I've just made a loop around it, attaching my 11-0 and 8-0 and clasp in a loop. Let's get you close so you can see. Now we're going to sew back through the 11-0, the 8-0, and the clasp 3 times. Just make loops coming back through. Not the 8-0 we put on top, but the 8-0 in the necklace. So I'm just going to sew through that a couple of times. Let's see, coming out here. Okay. Sew through that, sew through my clasp, sew back through my 8-0 and 11-0, sew back through the 8-0 on top. Now I'm not going to do it 3 times, simply because I want to keep my video a little shorter. But you need to do it at least 3 times just to secure your clasp really well. So let's say I've gone through and sewed 3 times. Now I'm going to go down into my 11-0s, right underneath the 8-0 I'm coming out of, and go to my next 8-0 and come out of it. I'm going to pull tight. Now this little 8-0 on top looks strange, but don't worry about it because we're going to fix it in just a few minutes here. So now pick up an 11-0, an 8-0, go through your clasp, sew through the 8-0 and the 11-0, come back through the opposite side of the 8-0 that you started attaching. And sew through it again. Through the clasp. Through the 8-0 and 11-0. Back through the 8-0. And do that one more time. Like I said, I'm not going to, just to save time. And once you're done doing that, we're going to go through these 2 seed beads here. An 11-0 and an 8-0. Sew through them and the clasp. And do that 3 times and we'll be back. Okay, so I have secured my bottom part of my clasp, and I'm coming out of this bottom seed bead here, this 8-0. So I'm going to sew through these 11-0s, this 8-0, my loop, all the way back up until I get to the top here. And I'm just going to sew following my original thread path all the way up my work. I've gone around this bottom loop here. I'm going into this 8/0. I'm going to go into, instead of going back through all these beads that I've sewn through already a million times, I'm going to go through this, these 2 seed beads here and come back up this way. Okay, at this point, it's best if you just kind of pull your needle aside and your thread aside, get your necklace, go to the other end where we started, where our stop bead is. Let me get out a little so you can see what I'm doing. Now to the end where we have our stop bead. It's best at this point to attach your other side of your clasp. Now you will just pull off your stop bead and attach the clasp exactly how you did on the other side. Just, if you can, fold it in half like this and do your first clasp, your first little loop on your clasp with it attached to the other side of your necklace, simply to make sure that you don't get your bar clasp upside down or backwards, or just, I've had issues with bar clasps in the past. I like to try to keep them together as long as I can. Once you get one secured, then you're not going to mess up. Or once you've established which one it is, of course you can separate it, and as long as you keep track of which one you want to sew into, go ahead and do it that way. And attach the other side of your clasp. Don't use the needle, your working thread that you've been using. Use your tail thread that you left in reserve, and just put a needle on it and attach it. And just try to keep the thread, your working thread, ready. And remember, when you're putting your clasp on, to add your little 8/0 on the top. Just go, you're coming out of the top of, I took my stop bead off, and my tail is coming out of this 8/0. You will first thread on another 8/0 and then go down into your first 8/0 bead and attach your clasp, just like we did on the other side. Don't forget that step. Okay, so I have sewn through, I've sewn my other end of my clasp on, and sewn through and as much as I could with my tail, and then knotted and cut my tail off and got rid of it. That way my necklace is now clasped and ready for my next step. Now I have left my original working thread coming out of the top bead on the other side, the side that we first put our clasp on. It's coming through this little seed bead on top here. We have this little 8/0 that we added. So what we're going to do is we're coming out of the 8/0 in the necklace. We're going to come up through the 8/0 that we added and kind of straighten him out. He's laying sideways. We want him to lay this way, not this way. So we're just going to go through him. After we've gone through our little 8/0 in the corner that we added while we were doing our clasp, we're coming out of it, we will then sew through the very next 2 seed beads next to it. Just going to go right through these 2 little seed beads. That's going to pull that seed bead kind of into line and make it stand up straight. Now we need to add a seed bead or an 8/0 in between every one of these gaps here where our two little 11 O's are. You can see that we have two 11 O's and an opening and two 11 O's and an opening. So we are going to sew through the 11 O's, which we've already done. Pick up an 8-O. And then we're going to sew through the next two 11 O's. And we are going to add an 8-O between each gap all the way the entire length of our necklace. Don't pull incredibly tight because you don't want to bunch up your necklace, but make sure that the seed bead pops right in between the other two. You don't want any thread showing or any loose areas, but you don't want to pull it tight to where you bunch the top of your necklace either. So you're just going to go through and gently pull your thread through until your 8-O is in place, and continue to do that all the way down until you get to the very end 8-O at the end of the length of your necklace. Okay, so I have inserted an 8-O seed bead in between the little spaces of the 11 O's all along the top of the necklace. Now, when you get done with that, put it in a circle like I have here and just kind of pull your thread just slightly to make sure that all the beads have drawn together nicely. Then clasp your necklace together and make sure that it doesn't bunch or tangle or do anything strange, that it lays in a really nice circle. And you can just kind of pull on it and tug on it a little bit. It is going to kind of lift and gap a little bit here and there, but you want it to look pretty straight. And what you're doing is just kind of adjusting that thread inside that you just added while adding all of the little 8-O's in between the 11 O's. After you get it to that point, then you can separate it again and just don't tug on your thread anymore. Now we are going to start our embellishment. So as you can tell, I have changed my beads. I put away my 11 O's and 8 O's that I was using in my netting, and now I have brought out my fire polished beads. Bring out your crystals, whatever you intend to use. And then your 11 O, your other color for your embellishment, and a 15 O. And we will start at the end where our thread is coming out. Now we went all the way through the top, and we are exiting the little 8-O that we added when we added our clasp. We are coming out of that 8-O now. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew through the 8-O right underneath the 8-O on the top that we added while we were sewing our clasp. So we're going to go into the 8-O in the necklace here. Okay, now we are going to sew down through these two little seed beads here to get to this 8-O in our necklace. And that's the first one where we will start our embellishment. So go through these two 11 O's, come out this 8-O. You will now pick up an 11 O, fire polished crystal, whatever you're using, and then we're going to go through this 8-O on the bottom here. And pull. Now we're going to start a little fringe stitch down here. So not only are we going to be embellishing the main body of our necklace, we're going to be embellishing we're going to be adding these little fringes down here on the bottom also. So after you come out of the bottom of this 8-O seed bead, now you will pick up another 11-O. Okay, I had to stop for a moment because I forgot that you also still need your 8-O's. So you can put away your 11-O's and you can get out your fire polish and your new 11-O's and your 15s, but leave your 8-O's out. I apologize for that. Okay, so now we're coming out of this 8-O here. We're going to pick up an 11-O from our embellishment, a fire polish bead, an 8-O, and a 15. just like that. And we're going to bring it down right in between where the two little loops separate on the bottom of the necklace. We are going to go around the 15. We're not going to go back through it, but we are going to go back through all the other beads. Pull through. Okay, this is where it can get loose and messed up. So grab onto your 15 in your fringe stitch here and pull your thread. There we go. And make sure that both the stitches stay tight. Now, you are coming out of this 8/0 seed bead right here. So we're going to sew up through these two 11/0s and get to this 8/0. So let's do that. Let's go up through these two 11/0s and into the 8/0 and come up. Now we're going to pick up on our needle an 11/0, a crystal or a fire polish, drop them down, and we are going to come up through this top 8/0. Okay, so now we're coming out of the top 8/0. We need to turn ourselves around so we can go back down. We will never sew through these very top spaces, and we will never sew through the very bottom loop. We will go up to the top, but not to the top, and we will go to the bottom, but not into the bottom spaces. I know that doesn't make any sense right now, but it will in a minute. So to turn ourselves back around, we have these little 8/0 seed beads on top that we added just a couple minutes ago. Sorry, blur. So we're coming out of this one here. We are going to sew through just the 8/0 on the top in our embellishment. Then back down through the 8/0 here. You can see that. And into our two 11/0s on the side of it and down to our next 8/0 in the body of our work. That has turned us around and got us ready to embellish our next little area here, our little 8/0 between our two 8/0s. So now we're going to pick up an 11/0, a fire polish, an 11/0, come back down through the 8/0 on the bottom, and now we are between our two loops, so we're going to add our fringe. We're going to pick up an 11/0, a fire polish, an 8/0, and a 15. We're going to go around the 15/0, up into the beads we just put on, and back up through the 8/0, just the 8/0, and pull through. Okay, so now we're going to sew through these two 11/0s right next to the 8/0 we're coming out through. Go through these two 11/0s and into the 8/0 and pull up. We're just basically avoiding our little loops on the bottom. Then you can lift your fringe up over them. And we're going to add our next fire polish bead. So 11/0, fire polish, 11/0, and we're going to come up through this top 8/0. So let's pick up the 8/0, go through it. Now to turn ourselves around, we're going to sew through the 8/0 in the embellishment, and then back down through our first 8/0, and then through the 11 O's on the side and the next 8 O directly next to the fire polish. We're just kind of following our original thread path and coming through. Now as you start to do this, it'll make sense. You'll know exactly where you need to go as you do it. It's just the first few, establishing them is a little difficult because we don't want to fill our loops on the bottom and we don't want to fill our loops on the very top here, our little triangular spaces. We just want to go in the midsection. So now I've got an 11-0, a fire polish, 11-0. We're going to go down through the 8-0. We are between our two loops here, so we need to pick up our fringe. We will pick up an 11-0, a fire polish, an 8-0, and a 15. Come around the 15, back up through the 11-0 and fire polish, go through the 8-0 and pull. If you can do it in one stroke, you can pick up the next two 11-0s also. If not, we'll go through these two 11-0s, back up through the 8-0, pick up an 11-0, fire polish, an 11-0, come back up through the top 8-0, come through the 8-0 in the embellishment, I apologize, I'm sewing upside down. It's a little difficult. So if I look a little awkward, well, I am. Okay, then back down through the 8-0, the two 11-0s to the side of the bead we just added, and through the 8-0. Next in line. Pick up an 11-0, fire polish bead, 11-0, sew down through the next 8-0, pick up an 11-0, oh, I made that one fly, a fire polish bead, an 8-0, and a 15, and add your fringe. So around the 15, all the way back up into the 8-0, the two 11-0s next to it, and the next 8-0. Just add a little diagonal there. Pull up. Now you're coming out of this 8-0 and you're ready to add your next embellishment. An 11-0, a fire polish bead, 11-0, back up through the top, 8-0, then through the embellishment 8-0 on the top here, pull through, come back through the 8-0 right underneath the 8-0 in the top of the necklace, go through the two 11-0s, the 8-0, next in line, pull through, pick up an 11-0, fire polish, 11-0, down through the next 8-0. Okay, go through the 8-0 on the bottom, pick up your fringe stitch, which will be an 11-0, a fire polish, an 8-0, and a 15. Come through around the 15, back up through the 8-0, the two 11-0s next to the 8-0, on a diagonal, and up through the next 8-0, and pull. Now we are ready to add our next embellishment. Continue to do this, going all the way to the top, going through your top embellishment, just as we've been doing, all the way till you get to the longer stitches, and then we'll discuss how to do that. It's exactly the same thing. You'll just be adding more, of course. Okay, So I've done my embellishment all the way over to where I'm just about ready to start my longer segments. So I've added this little embellishment here. I've gone through my top seed bead on the top. Now I need to go back through my 8/0, my 2 11/0s in a diagonal, down into the next 8/0. Let's see here. There we go. And pull through. And just like we've been doing, we'll pick up an 11/0, a fire polish, an 11/0, and go down into the next 8/0. And right here in the segment where it gets longer, we're going to go ahead and put a fringe, just like we've been doing, an 11/0, a fire polish, an 8/0, and a 15. Go around the 15, back up through all the beads, and the 8/0, two 11/0s, and the next 8/0, right in a diagonal here. Now we can put our embellishment through here, wrap around, and proceed just like we have been doing. So we are going to pick up an 11/0, a fire polish, an 11/0, come up through the top 8/0, and then through the embellishment, back down through the 8/0, Now, the thing that's different about this is that we're going to have to sew, we have extra length here, so now we have to sew through these two 11/0s to get to this 8/0 to finish out our segment here, our longer segment. So instead of just going through right here and putting our embellishment on, we're going to sew through these two 11/0s, and this will be rather obvious. Once you get the rhythm of this, you'll know where you need to go. So we're going to come through this 8/0 now. We're going to pick up an 11/0, a fire polish bead, an 11/0, come down through the next 8/0. If you want to, you can go through the next two 11s also, but I'm not going to do that just for the sake of not confusing you. Now, we're coming out of this 8/0. We need to get in between these two loops to add our fringe, as we've been doing with the shorter ones. So we're going to go through this 11/0, or these two 11/0s, which I probably should have done when I went through my 8/0, but that's okay. And then down through the 8/0, pick up an 11/0, a fire polish bead, an 8/0, and a 15. I dropped my 15. Let me get a 15 here. Now we're going to go around the 15 as we've been doing into the other two beads and up through the 8/0. Now we are in position to do our row here. So we want to go from this 8/0 to this 8/0 with our embellishment. Pick up an 11/0, a fire polish bead. Did you see that? Let's see. From this 8/0 to this 8/0. So an 11/0, a fire polish bead, an 11/0, up through this 8/0, and again, we're going to go from this 8/0 to this 8/0. So let me adjust my thread for a minute here. Pick up an 11/0, a fire polish bead, an 11/0, up through the next 8/0, And now we need to, so from here to get up to this 8-0, so we're going to go into the 2 11-0s and the 8-0, so through the top embellishment, back down into the 8-0, pick up an 11-0, a fire polish, an 11-0, and down into the next 8-0, now we're going to go from here to here, 11-0, 8-0, or I'm sorry, fire polish, 11-0, into the next 8-0. I'm also going to go down through the 2 11s and the bottom 8-0, just to position myself for my fringe. Now I'm going to pick up an 11-0, a fire polish bead, an 8-0, and a 15. And sometimes you need to move your little 11-0s on top when you're doing your fringe to arrange them nicely. I'm going to go around my 15, back up through the 8-0, pick up an 11-0, fire polish bead, an 11-0, back up through, and again an 11-0, fire polish bead, and an 11-0, up through the next one, and I'm going to go through these 2 11-0s and get up to my top 8-0. Then I'm going to loop through the embellishment 8-0 and back down into the top 8-0 in the necklace. Pick up an 11-0, a fire polish bead, an 11-0, and scoop back down to the next. And we'll just continue doing this through the entire necklace. 11-0, fire polish bead, 11-0. This takes several hours to do. Just the embellishment alone will take a couple hours. The netting is the biggest part. It takes quite a while by the time you get your clasp on. It's easier if when you're coming out of your 8-0 on the bottom here, if you just go directly into your 11-0s. If you don't, you have to struggle with it just a little bit. The netting, as I was saying, and the clasping and all of that, the top embellishment, that takes the longest. This embellishment does take some time. However, once you get started on it and you get a rhythm going, it's really not too bad. Just put aside several hours or pick it up later and do it again while you're watching TV, whatever. Move your fringe on top. 11-0, fire polish bead, 11-0, back up through, 11-0, fire polish bead, 11-0, back up through, and then through the 2 11-0s, and through the 8-0 on the top here. Circle through the top bead, and the embellishment on the top. Pull through. Back down into your 8/0. And you are ready to start another row of embellishment. And just continue that all the way through the entire length of your necklace. And you get back down to your shorter ones. You will just do the same thing you did on this side. And make sure that you put a fringe right in the part where it transitions from long to short, and just continue to the end. We will not do the very last little squished up row here. I mean, by squished up, my little sections are not open. You won't worry about embellishing those. When we get to that point, then we will tie off. I will see you then. Okay, so I have sewn my embellishment all the way to the point to where I am ready to start my shorter segments on the other end of my necklace. Now it gets a little tricky right here simply because you'll be coming out of this 8/0 and there's really no way to get back to this one and make your little fringe here unless you sew through your embellishment. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, we're coming out of the end here, and we need to put an embellishment here. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew around this loop, and then we're going to sew up through this entire area, come back up through this bead, and then we'll work our way back down, and then we'll be in line for our embellishment. Okay, so now I have finished my entire necklace. I finished my embellishment, and I just sewed back through several of the stitches until my thread was secure, doing half-hitch knots, and just cut off my working thread, and this is what I ended up with. One good note is that I miscalculated in the beginning with beads, because I started out with exactly 600 fire polish beads and I still have 200. So it's closer to 400 that this necklace takes, not 600, which is nice, helpful thing to know. I must have miscalculated when I counted on my original necklace. So this is what it ends up looking like, and it worked out really nice with the fire polish beads. It's still very pretty. This is what it looks like with the crystal. A little bit more blingy. Now this crystal I got from Z-Net shows. It's a very pretty 4mm opal crystal, and it's very affordable crystal. So when you're buying high amounts for projects like this, it's a really good place to go. A lot of people ask me where I get my crystal, and for my bigger projects, if I don't want to totally go broke, I will get it from Z-Net shows. It's a very pretty, very quality crystal. So that's where I get my crystal. And of course these are check fire polish beads. And that is what the necklace looks like. I hope you enjoyed the project. If you have any issues or concerns, please leave a comment, or if you just want to give us some feedback. Thanks. Bye-bye.